You like movies about gladiators?
Those men wanted to have sex with me!
Great Scott!
Nice beaver.
He's a Cinderella boy.
Rambo is a pussy.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGhee.
I'm George McGhee.
And this time, it's time for something a little bit different. After the excesses of Christmas, it's the bank holiday time. It's time for bank holiday films.
For sitting on the sofa and watching, some great guilty pleasures.
And so we thought, given it was the year of his passing, and because it's exactly the same sort of film that you would watch around this time of year or any other bank holiday, whether it's Easter, we're going to be doing A View to a Kill, starring Roger Moore, directed by John Glenn. And what are we going to do, George? What can people look forward to? The usual?
Well, yeah, we're going to do a little bit of background. The Bond legacy, saga, whatever you want to call it, is such a behemoth. Try and not waffle on for too long on the production chat side of things. And then I think we're just going to delve into the fun of the film itself for all its good and bad bits.
Even if you haven't listened to our Roger Moore special that we did earlier in the year, we have a lot of love for the guy. We're obviously massive Bond fans. We've watched these films a lot, and that's why if we skip and go backwards and forwards a little bit, we do apologise, but we have a lot of love for this film. But even he admitted that he felt like he was 400 years too old for this role, but with hilarious consequences for us, the audience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll skip through the film, having a great time, laughing along with Christopher Walken.
Got some coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, coulda, woulda, shoulda, and then we'll probably do some tie-ins about fond memories and New Year resolutions, who knows. But before we go any further, here's a general word on housekeeping.
Hello, welcome to housekeeping. I'm Roger Moore. Now be warned, these guys, they're not professionals, but they do love a good film or two. There will be very bad impressions, very coarse language, and of course, the odd spoiler or two. But sit back, open some lovely vermouth, and enjoy.
So, George, what are we recording on? I hope it involves some form of microchip.
Well, microchip and being a Bond film, lots of Sony product placement. So I've got my Walkman, got my boombox, it's all set up, and it's protected by microchips, so I think we'll be all right.
Excellent. Okay, well,
on with the show.
On with the show.
Roger Moore is James Bond 007 with Tanya Roberts, Grace Jones, and Christopher Walken. Has James Bond finally met his match? Find out this summer in A View to a Kill. Title song performed by Duran Duran.
So, George, the 14th Bond film featuring our much-loved Sir Roger Moore, a John Glenn special, and even Christopher Walken.
Yes, well, it's the first Oscar winner to appear in a Bond film, so that's a little bit of trivia for you. He'd won an Oscar for The Deer Hunter.
And we normally do give a warning about bad impressions, but George and I are famous for our terrible impressions of Christopher Walken, but I mean, we're going to put a warning out, but we just don't know when they're going to pop up.
They will be unannounced. They will be terrible, but hopefully they will be fairly brief. So you were saying there's a 15-second skip feature on most podcast players. So
yeah, just skip ahead.
That might be the time if you're really finding them offensive.
We're going to limit them
to a certain degree.
Yeah, we'll try and squeeze them down, so skip 15 seconds and hopefully you won't miss too much, or just sit back and enjoy. Yeah. So, George, A View to a Kill, a title that makes perfect sense. How did we get here?
How did we get here? So, it is the 14th Bond film, am I correct?
Correct.
So, the 14th Bond film, 1985, and it's directed by John Glenn. John Glenn is responsible for directing all the 80s Bond films, so from For Your Eyes Only in 1981 all the way to our favourite Timothy Dalton, bowing out in Licence to Kill in 1989. So he had always been part of the Bond sort of production family for quite some time. Started off working with them as an editor on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Did some second unit directing on Her Majesty's The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. So I say I don't want to go into it too much, but the Bond family is, so it's headed up. It was headed up originally by Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman as a partnership. Harry Saltzman ended up having to sell off his part of the company, but Cubby Broccoli continued on, I think, from Spy Who Loved Me, just doing it himself. He's he did treat it a bit like a family, so people would keep returning to work on the films, all the crew and stuff, the editors and directors, and it was a very sort of welcoming atmosphere. People were looked after, and it
shows. I mean, there's no other franchise that's come close to make so many films.
Well, it's still running, yeah.
That's still going. It cannot be killed.
And effectively, it still is a family business, so it's currently still run by Barbara Broccoli, Cubby's daughter, and Michael G. Wilson, who is his stepson, and this is the first time that he has an active producing role in the film. So he'd been some executive producers, and there's an ongoing trend. Michael G. Wilson
pops up.
He has a cameo, I think, in every film from, I think, The Spy Who Loved Me onwards, and he also got involved in the screenwriting of the films as well. So I think this is quite a big step, because this is the first time he is actively credited as a regular producer alongside Cubby, and then that was sort of the start of the changeover, because Cubby was getting quite old and he ended up passing it on to Barbara and Michael. I say it's quite a family affair type thing. John Glenn has a certain style, I think you can sort of see from those films, from For Your Eyes Only to Licence to Kill, and slowly going towards a harder edge. And I think that's something that Roger was conscious that he wasn't getting any younger, and the films were having to change, I suppose, to audience demands. Obviously, the 80s action films were coming out of nowhere, and it was harder to compete with them. So
the action hero, as it were, it was the one-man army thing. It was the Rambo, it was Die Hard, it was Commando. This guy taking on entire armies rather than...
and on-screen violence was becoming more acceptable, and even Roger said it's his least favourite film because of there's so much unnecessary violence.
So many fight scenes that he had to watch from the wings.
Somebody else, his stuntman carrying out. And in terms of the background for the story, Bond films are always famous for trying to tap into current trends, and sometimes they might slightly miss the boat and try and say, well, you know, what's a leading topic in terms of what could we use as a weapon, or
what's hot right now.
So in this one, you've got microchips, and as you said, everything has a
bloody microchip in it. It like opens up there's a scene involving opening a fridge which has test tubes in it, and the cover comes back and it's like all the noises are beep, beep, beep. Everything's got a microchip in it.
They are the future of 1985. Microchips are the future, and the idea actually come from Michael G. Wilson, who was doing the research, and that was the sort of the business boom at that time was all about microchips. He's like, why don't we do something about that?
They can take over the world.
Take over the world. If you know your Bond films well, it's pretty much a thinly sketched rewrite of Goldfinger in terms of the main sort of plot points of an industrialist trying to corner the market and eliminate the competition.
Operation Grand Slam replaced by
Operation Main Strike.
Since this is the heartland of electronic production in the United States, which accounts for 80% of the world microchip market, I propose to end the domination of Silicon Valley, for which each of you will pay me $100 million.
In terms of why I was quite keen to cover this, and obviously, we talked about, obviously we lost Roger earlier this year, but for me, it was the first Bond film I ever saw.
Yeah.
I remember rushing back from school because it'd been recorded on ITV the night before and it was on too late for me. rushing back, and I think it was probably on a Sunday.
I didn't see this at the cinema either. This was a bank holiday special, and the weird thing is that they mix up the Bond order. I mean, they don't do them in order, so sometimes you're jumping around with Bond films on a bank holiday on Easter or what have you, but I definitely saw this because, as you quickly mentioned, why I think I have so much love for The Living Daylights is that was the first Bond film I saw in the cinema, so obviously it resonates in a different way, and if we're part of a few discussion groups on Bond, yes, that is how geeky we get about it, and it is a discussion that comes up a lot, and it seems to be it's all about how old you were when you got into Bond. That normally kind of dictates who your favourite Bond is. Like, we all agree Sean Connery was the man, but everyone has like another favourite, and it's always linked to when you got into them, so it's a big factor.
Yeah, and I suppose youth and innocence puts a sort of filter over.
We were totally unaware of how old he was.
Yeah, and you just see it as, a really exciting action film. It's like not why is that really old man scaring that very young, sexy lady? But I'm sure we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, that, as you say, it's interesting with the Bond films that as you growing up with him in the 80s, you did completely hop about and you were at mercy, and it's another thing we talked about in our Roger Moore special on Mark O'Connell's book, Catching Bullets, and that's very much a great snapshot of somebody discovering the films completely out of kilter and like, wait, there's another guy?
Yeah.
And then there's another guy that plays him as well. Whilst this film is probably at the bottom of a lot of people's Bond lists, it definitely has an affectionate place in my heart because it was, my first time with Bond, my Bond virginity.
Yeah. And also Christopher Walken is the bad guy.
And you've got an amazing bad guy, and you've just got the amazing and blatant use of some very brave stunt people.
Yeah,
So should we get cracking into it?
Let's take a dive into the film, or let's jump off a mountain into that first scene.
We're in Siberia.
Yeah,
icy Siberia. Roger's on a mission.
He's doing a bit of sleuthing. He's doing a bit of spying. I always forget about that bit because I'm like, come on, there's going to be a chase. But he actually finds a dead body.
Well, it's another 00 agent, and I'm pretty sure in all of the John Glenn Bond films, there's a dead 00 at the start of them. It's how it gets kicked off.
Yeah, it's normally 006 or 003.
One of the random numbers. You never meet. You just see his corpse.
Yeah.
Or you're quickly introduced to him, and then he's dead.
Quickly, yeah. It's only in there's only a few times when they're anything more. Trevelyan.
That's it. I mean, Goldfinger made it. One of the brilliant hooks of Goldfinger was you actually seeing another 00 agent up against Bond, and I suppose Skyfall did as well. But yes, it's sort of like a bit of a John Glenn.
Goldeneye, you mean?
Sorry, did I say Goldfinger?
Yeah, obsessed. It's your favourite film. You're obsessed.
Goldfinger. Bit of a John Glenn trope. The dying 00 agent that's not really named.
So it's 1985, George. We're in the mountains. What's hot right now?
Snowboarding.
And just to prove how much, because I mean, they were riding the snow wave, but I mean, this was the cusp, but you could argue that this had a big influence on snowboarding.
Popularising it, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you think there was no YouTube, there was no extreme sports channels, this was sort of the first popular culture entry for snowboarding, and it was actually, the stunt was performed by the guy who invented it.
That seals it for me. You discovered snowboarding because of Roger Moore. Roger Moore
single-handedly invented snowboarding, and if you want to sort of move some words around.
Yeah.
But it's a great scene, it's a very obvious stuntman aside, and obvious rear back projection of Roger just stood there in the studio looking a bit stressed. It is a really good action scene. You've got, some great moments of Bond taking out the snowmobile and the other guys and stuff like that.
Using little tricks. Yeah, and obviously Bond is an expert at everything he does. We love this in all of the films. Certainly LOX, I think you mean liquid oxygen. Isn't that used for rocket fuel? It's like, we don't know how he finds out all the stuff, but obviously he's an amazing skier.
He has a lot of spare time when he's travelling to read up on these things.
Yeah, exactly. He gets all those reports. It's a great scene.
But the snowboarding scene is a really cool scene, but it's completely ruined by adding in for comic effect. So a Beach Boys cover. It's not even the real Beach Boys. You've got California Girls.
Yeah. And sung by a tribute band.
Sung by probably John Glenn's cousin. And it's a bit like that moment in The Man with the Golden Gun, where there's the amazing barrel roll.
One of the best stunts of its time.
Yeah, barrel roll car flip, and they feel the need to insert a slide whistle. beep, which just ruins the dramatic effect. So I think that's a bit of an ill-advised moment there. But then we'll see our first, what now looks quite an uncomfortable love scene between Roger and a poor, unsuspecting assistant. I mean, what's her job? Her job is not to drive the self-driving submarine. No, that looks like an iceberg. No, she'll just relays message. She's basically like his icy receptionist, an iceberg receptionist. Do you think she knows what's coming when he comes down that hatch? And she's like, you may need to sleep with him. There'll be lots of champagne, caviar, but just make sure you drink a lot of vodka.
Commander Bond.
Call me James. It's 5 days to Alaska.
Yeah, and Roger, let's be honest, well, it's quite a well-known fact that he had a bit of a nip and tuck before doing this. He's had a bit of plastic surgery as old Rog, and I've just got down my notes, he looks a bit like a scared ghost. His eyes are constantly bulging out, and he's constantly being surprised, like, oh, hello. So yes, I think this is like, in terms of bedding ladies, I think this is like Roger Moore's highest when he's at his oldest. So. Yeah. Well, they're like, just put him next to a young girl. It'll bring down the age. It's like you put them next to each other, no one will tell the difference. Exactly. But then we cut to, obviously, the credits, and we have one of my favourite Bond film themes, A View to a Kill by Duran Duran. Yeah. I am a Duran Duran fan, but I think out of all the Bond tunes, I mean, people who know me will know that I listen to them on fairly regular rotation, but I'll quite happily listen to Duran Duran just on a random playlist. I'll probably listen to it the most frequently of all the Bond tunes, because it's a good pop song. Well, also I liked how they came back in the 90s, and I know they probably did a few other tracks, but that Ordinary World track they came back with was kind of like, look, we can adapt, and then they just went away again. Yeah. It was kind of like, yes, we could keep going, but we're not going to. But yeah, they're a big part. Did they come back? Because there was Aha and Duran Duran, I think, they were it was the first sort of real time they went to a proper sort of young band. I mean, obviously they'd had McCartney and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that was, again, a bit of a ploy to sort of tap into the MTV generation, to try and skew a younger audience, who was really hot at the time. Yeah. And obviously that stuck. And they were like, look, A View to a Kill doesn't make much sense. We'll get a line in there, but we're not going to call it. We're going to come up with a much better line, which is dance into the fire, play with danger, and we're going to have lots of silhouettes. Oh, was that a nipple? Oh, people skiing in the buff. Yeah. Which was performed by the British ski team, which you see in the credits at the end of the film, which I always spot something for the first time when I watch a Bond film, and it's, mind you, these days it is normally in the credits. Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was funny. The British ski or snowboarding team were involved in those stunts. Well, got to keep the British end up, but of course. But yeah, so I would probably usually 9 out of 10 times skip the Bond titles, but I just am quite happy to sit back and indulge in some Duran Duran. Yeah, you're too busy throwing shapes on the train by myself, getting strange looks. So we're at the races, where we get, the obligatory Bond is given his mission in M's office. Yeah. Q sat there with a robot dog, because again, technology and gadgets. The robots are coming. Because I was just trying to think, what's going on in there? Like, there's just 3 old men in a room just staring at a robot on the floor, and like, so what does it do? Well, it goes back and forth, and but stuff. They have got the padded doors. They've got the old offices. They've got that. They have kept that look and feel, which they've gone back to in recent years with the Daniel Craig ones. Yes, definitely. So we're then sort of given the mission of Bond is put on the scent of leading French industrialist Max Zorin, who M describes as having no accent. Was he speaks German or 17 languages and has no accent? Get him away from her. Yeah, leading French industrialists. Spent a bit of time in Jersey. Jersey. So yeah, you've got. What I would like to say, just before we move on, that scene in M's office, the fact that Roger Moore's so old, it actually, because you just say it looks like 3 old men looking around a robot. Make that full. Yeah, when Roger walks in, it kind of looks a bit more believable, because in the beginning, when Bond was so young, it was like young buck, and these old men were ordering him about. Now it kind of looks like an old gentleman's club. He's one of the team. Bond, we're sending you out to Paris. But let's all go to the races first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit perplexed why Q and Moneypenny are at the races anyway, but I suppose they're allowed out. Yeah, they're allowed out every once in a while. But
Sir Geoffrey Tibbet, which is, I think, a great name for a cat or a dog.
Yeah, is it Sir Geoffrey or Sir Godfrey?
Is it Sir Godfrey. Sir Godfrey Tibbet.
Yes, the legendary Patrick McGhee from the Avengers. So again, there's sort of plenty of actors that have been in the Avengers, not the Marvel Avengers, for you young ones. No, the 1960s spy series. So obviously Diana Rigg, Joanna Lumley, Honor Blackman. So there was all sort of ties. There's a lot of crossover with Avengers actors, and I think Patrick McGhee was a close friend of Rogers. So
look the type. I could see those two together. I mean, they look, but when they're both wearing their shell suits, doing their sleuthing together, they look like such an amazing. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But yeah, I think those scenes between the two of them, they're a lot of fun. They're one of the strengths of the films. They've obviously got a good natural chemistry.
Yeah.
But first, we have to make another detour. We've been to the races, but Charlie, it's an area we're familiar with. Let's go to Paris.
And as I said, Paris has not changed one iota. Sure, the cars may have changed, the fashions are just as risque and avant-garde, but Eiffel Tower's still there. That restaurant that doesn't exist is still there.
And that's where we get to meet the amazingly named Achille Aubergine.
I can't believe we've never picked up on that. Is it just because I live in France now and I spot these things? But like,
well, you must have loads of people that your neighbour, Monsieur Potato.
I've got Peter Pamplemousse.
Pamplemousse, yes, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Terry Canard.
Yeah, and then so I mean Achille Aubergine, and you see these serious M and Q saying, "What does Aubergine think?" He's talking about a real aubergine,
and it doesn't really help that it is so badly overdubbed.
Oh, and the ADR.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it on DVD, and I had the obligatory trailer of all the Bond films remastered, digitally decoded for cutting edge sound. It's like, could you not at least try and sort out his voice a bit?
But the key to this mystery is there, and I, Achille Aubergine, intend to find it.
Yeah,
but Achille Aubergine is on the case.
His whole thing is, you're like, hang on, that guy doing the voiceover died, or did that actor die?
Died mid-recording session.
Which one of them died? And that is one lethal fishing rod, isn't it?
Well, it takes out poor Roger Moore.
Yeah, I mean, he's just trying to get up the stairs, and she throws a fishing rod at him, and I don't think this is about his age. It's like, so yeah, Roger, she throws the fishing rod at you, you struggle with it for a few seconds so she can gain, she can run away from you. So I struggle with the fishing rod. Okay.
It's wrapped around my legs.
Okay.
Not very tightly, I hope.
Yeah.
Don't want to cut off the circulation.
But that's a great scene, great stunt.
Great stunt, yeah, base jumping off the Eiffel Tower.
Which you can clearly see somebody did, or they managed to get a guy, I'm not sure.
They got clearance to do it once.
Yeah. He was just told to avoid all of the Asian couples who are getting married underneath the Eiffel Tower.
Well, you can actually see they've actually built out a platform for it to jump off.
Yeah.
Then there's he gets down to street level to chase after.
It's so many stereotypes.
And you've got don't the French taxi drivers sit in their car with I think a sandwich and a pint of wine? Oh my car!
That's the problem. I mean, Uber's changed all that, but it's
not as relaxed as
it's not as relaxed as it used to be. A guy having a sort of like a cup of onion soup as he waits with a croissant, and there's so many stereotypes. But it's great. It is a good scene. He's driving in half a car.
Well, who's driving the car?
What, George? It's Roger Moore. It's clearly he gets into the car.
It's a man in a wig with the same hair colour as Roger Moore. That's close enough.
There are so many stuntmen in this film.
Oh yeah, and yeah, that's a little bit ridiculous with the half car driving around. Roger jumps onto a boat, ruins someone's wedding, but then gives it some sort of glib remark. Congratulations.
Oh yeah, because I'm just trying to think when's the bit with I don't know, we're kind of, because what comes next after there's that scene in Paris. He goes. It's that he obviously drives up the road. I've been to this. He goes to the chateau.
Oh, yes.
So we're going out to the bit with the chateau. I've been to this chateau, and it's a beautiful place at Chantilly. There's the horse stables. Looks like a mansion. It looks like a chateau.
It is actually the horse stable.
That is actually the horse stable, and it's crazy.
I thought it was just like a bit of a pun, like, oh yeah, this guy's got so much money. Look at the horse stables.
No, but there's the maids. They have been. It is accurate in that there's the maids' quarters. Looks like an amazing house. Then there's the horse stables, which it looks like a chateau, and then there's also the chateau. And if you go there, all around it, the scenes there's like pictures of Roger Moore, and there's loads of people posing Bond style. But it's a beautiful garden.
Just walking around the estate in the style of James Bond.
Yeah, exactly. In a white tux. I just want to say, when he puts those glasses on, when he's sleuthing,
massive aviators.
He's showing his age because he's really struggling when he has to do the fiddly bit where to change the lenses, you can see his fingers wrapping around. Just look cool. Practice loads.
Just look cool. So, yeah, we get to meet properly.
Mad industrialist Max Zorin.
Max Zorin, a French industrialist. We get to meet his evil Nazi granddad, complete with monocle. Yeah, jawohl, I work on the horses. Who's not a stereotype. Not a stereotype. Yeah, there's the banter between Tibbet and Bond, where they do that very clever sleuthing of having the conversation. They find the bug, and then they pull out the tape recorder that has this recorded conversation.
So we need to keep having that conversation.
How long does that conversation go on for? Yeah. And there's even a point later on where he's like, it's all right, my tape of me snoring is playing. It's like, oh, it's going to run out soon. It's like, Roger...
The tape ran out 10 minutes ago.
So like, Roger, we just need you in the recording... Bond, we need you in the recording booth. Just need to do some snoring. Oh, I couldn't do that. For how long? 4 hours? Yeah, so you get some great bit of banter with those guys. As you say, that brilliant bit of sleuthing where Roger's in his velour tracksuit.
Both of them are. Both him and Sir Godfrey. Are in their beautiful. Beautiful shell suits. But it's actually quite cool. They went for like dark colours. They didn't go.
Well, I've put it down in my notes. Looks like some OAP who has won the lottery. So they're used to wearing a tracksuit. They still want to wear a tracksuit, but they want to spend some money on a good tracksuit, and that's the kind of vibe that Roger's giving off.
I just don't think either of them look threatening. It's like if a security guard found them, it's like, how did you get out of your room? Are you lost?
Yes.
I don't think they try and take him out. They just say, oh, poor old man, you guys get lost.
Yeah, there's security. I found 2 old men wandering the estate. We should really ring, is it with the nearest home? I think they've got loose.
They've escaped. They don't look to be an opposing threat, but they are doing some sleuthing. They're opening up things. As I mentioned before, everything has a microchip.
Everything has
press that button. Okay, there's something else. There's something.
Of switches and...
Yeah. And this film is full of the Bond sound effects.
Yes.
Today that would be like a folder just full of MP3 files, but back then it must have been, a suitcase full of tapes.
What have we got in the audio library? I need a pinging noise.
I've got flashing and beeping light 1. I've got radar sweep 2, and then I've got microchips 1 through 7. Beep, 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 beep.
I must congratulate you, Mrs. Zorin. Your stables are magnificent.
Built in the 16th century by a duke who believed he'd be reincarnated as a horse.
So the French industrialist Max Zorin is obviously on the case, so they have their tete-a-tete across the table where he's using the latest technology to scan Roger Moore on an Amstrad and work out he's 007. One of my favourite Walken-isms where they're having a bit of back and forth about riding. And he goes, do you like to ride? And he goes, I'm happiest when I'm in the saddle. And you've got that great scene of, again, like the Goldfinger thing, instead of them playing golf, they're horse racing against each other. It's very competitive. More microchips controlling the horse jumps and the horse boxes.
Microchips in the injector.
In the horse.
And in the horse.
Microchips in the horse.
But no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, just microchips. I press a button.
Just microchips.
Yeah.
Aren't we introduced to the lovely Stacey? The lovely Stacey Sutton, who is, I think, 40 years close to 40 years Roger's junior. I think Roger got a bit miffed when he found out that he was the same age as the actress's mother.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say They have no chemistry, but it kind of works in those earlier scenes because you've got Roger's obviously seeing a lucky duck, and pops down with in his white tux and a bottle of champagne, and she's clearly not interested. And Christopher Walken can see that.
Get him away from her.
So he goes, oh, get them away from her. And Mayday does, promptly interject.
Not a lot of chemistry there either.
I'm still terrified of Grace Jones.
I think everyone is a little bit.
And that scene where Roger's waiting in bed for her.
He's looking really old.
He's looking really old.
And rapey, a little bit.
She's looking a bit scared. He's looking terrified. There's that bit where she rolls on top of him, and I genuinely did see fear in his eyes. His eyes are always popping out, bad facelift, but genuine fear. He's like, this woman might hurt me. Cubby, I'm not comfortable with this.
You do feel a bit fearful for him at that stage. She looks really muscular, and you're worried, he could suffocate or something.
Break a hip.
Or a heart attack, maybe, if he has too much fun.
I'm just going to pop a Viagra.
It's in its research phase, Bond. Be careful with that tablet.
No. I think that's the last of the sort of the French scenes.
Do we get introduced to Turd Ferguson? I mean, sorry, that won't mean a lot to a lot of people, but how would you describe that guy? The oil tycoon.
I want Burt Reynolds, but I don't want to pay Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds wants 30 million. Okay, can you get me somebody who looks like Burt Reynolds? I want a
Texan-type guy, mustache, all-round American oil industrialist.
Okay.
We've got a guy, yeah, so we've got budget Burt Reynolds, who is turned up, to be introduced later in the plot.
Yeah.
And then, do they go straight to San Francisco from there? There's a bit of hopping around.
Yeah, because it then moves and he's got to meet his contact. And there's the thing with, where does the Russian girl come into this?
So they go over he starts investigating in San Francisco. He meets the Asian agent, because they said they want to mix it up. Apparently it was going to be Felix Leiter, but because they're filming in Chinatown, they thought it should be an Asian contact.
But obviously he needed massive ADR work as well.
And somebody needed to be the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
Then Roger's on a mission, and surprisingly, it looks like it's him in the wetsuit.
Yeah, I think it was.
He's obviously done his bit of scuba gear stuff in the background.
I just love the way how when he meets, because this agent, she was supposed to be...
Paula Inonova, or whatever she's called, was... Yeah, originally, and I think this would have been great if they pulled it off, was originally supposed to be...
The gorgeous and delightful Barbara Bach.
Agent XXX.
From The Spy Who Loved Me, which would have been a really nice time, because this would have only been a few films, or one or...
There would
have been a long enough gap.
I think it would have been a nice sort of bookend to have a returning character, and it's something that the Bond films haven't done that much. I mean, to make it even more confusing, Bond films would rather have a returning actor but in a different role.
Yeah.
Done that more than a few times. It's a shame that Barbara Bach didn't want to return, so we get some other bit of...
James! Paula! Wet t-shirt.
Yes, and so Roger's quickly bedding her as well, and the bubbles are tickling her. Tchaikovsky.
We were very confused. We spent a long time thinking that women had something called a Tchaikovsky.
Dad, what's a Tchaikovsky?
And that's not too uncomfortable. They establish they've got some history, and you just think, well, that makes sense. Maybe she was really young when they got together.
She seems up for it. Yeah. She doesn't seem terrified like all the other women. And we get quickly onto Operation Main Strike, which is something to do with
it's actually really complicated, because he tries to do what Lex Luthor does in Superman, which is basically flood parts of California.
Yeah.
But he does it in a really... It's pretty complicated.
It's pumping in loads of water, triggering an earthquake, and then
and then both plates will move, and it'll be a double earthquake.
But it'll only take out Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Which apparently is a terrible plan, because there's no actual microchips made in Silicon Valley. It's just all
They're assembled. They're assembled in Silicon Valley.
But they're all made in, at the time, I think they're all made in China or Japan. So yeah, a bit of a flaw there. Max.
But you'll believe anything of Max Soren, because, I mean, he's got a blimp.
Well, that's it again. Current trends. What's hot in the 80s? What about a bad guy with a blimp? I mean, they're pretty threatening, right?
Yeah. It's quite a small blimp. Or in some scenes it's bigger than other scenes,
I think he's got 2 different blimps, but then again, that just could be depending on what stock footage they have available.
Just that blimp, when the blimp's coming down to catch Stacy, it just looks tiny. It looks, and it comes really silently behind her, and he's like, and you see Roger struggling over the uneven ground.
Stacy, doesn't actually manage to get out. There's an air. Can you not hear the airship behind you?
Yeah, that airship that's slowly creeping behind you. But yeah, we've skirted ahead because there's a bit with.
Well, there's a class again, that sort of rip-off of Goldfinger, where he's got all the heads of the various businesses round a table. He's had some architect firm spend lots of money and time on a map that comes out of nowhere.
That's amazing. We need to find a guy who makes those.
Well, yeah, I want to see like a spin-off side episode of the guy. What do you want? A map of what?
And then you want it to be full of water. Okay.
You've got the very good death trap of the guy who's like, dropped out the airship.
I want no part of it, thank you.
As you wish. The rest of our discussion must, of course, be confidential. Would you wait outside?
If you'd like me to, yes. Excuse me. Thank you.
Mayday. I'll provide you with a drink.
Yeah. It's like, you're free to leave.
But would you mind stepping outside? But we've got to get back to the struggle at Stacy's house, where Roger's really struggling, or is Stuntman struggling.
We don't know who is who.
There's a lot of struggling.
And then Roger makes a quiche.
Roger makes a quiche because he's a real man.
And doesn't sleep with her because at that moment he thinks she's too young.
He has a bit of a granddad nap in the chair. And then he gets horribly awoken by the earthquake. Whoa, where am I? Stacey? Where are my pills? But then they're at City Hall.
Yeah, what a scene. And that guy, I recognise him from something else, the guy who's the How.
I think he was in Murder One or something. Yeah. Like, he was in like a crime lawyer show in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, he delivers his lines very well. But then I just love the way Zoran turns up out of nowhere. Because, I mean, the timing is brilliant. Stacey's used her key to get in there. And, they're rifling through and they find all the things. And then in he comes. It's like, alive, after all. It's so...
But it's all right, I've got another elaborate death trap planned.
Yeah. And we have that great line of...
But that means I would have to be...
Dead.
Dead!
Yeah, I mean, it's been talked about before, but I mean, is that Roger on the ladder as he's walking down the ladder? Is it? We're not sure. He is at the end of the ladder.
It is at the very end of the ladder.
I mean, he wasn't insured to climb down a ladder.
But apparently it's Roger Moore was the only person on set at that time that could drive a fire truck, so he's actually driving a lot of those scenes of the fire truck, not the part where he's on the back.
Yeah.
But he did actually do some driving.
But what we do have to mention, obviously we've been known to delve into a little bit of Alan Partridge from time to time, and watching it this time, there's a lot of, if you've watched any Alan Partridge, he does like his leather jacket, and there's that scene where he reveals to both Stacy and the fire chief that he's not actually called James Stock. He's actually...
Or St. John Smythe.
He starts off as St. John Smythe and then goes, no, Stacey, I'm actually called James Stock. And then to both of them, he does this really slow turn around, and it's so Partridge. He turns around and goes, actually, the name's Bond.
And he's got his hands in his pockets.
He's got his hands in his pockets, and it's so Partridge, but it's just the way that he moves. I don't know if he's got his collars up, and it's just like, oh my God. It's like Steve Coogan has just dropped in. It's brilliant. Or one's echoing the other. I mean, obviously Partridge echoes a lot of Roger Moore Bond.
Yes, yeah. I got that whole scene is just a bit like trying to be Blues Brothers light. You've got like cop cars really like crashing chaotically.
We're talking
over the place.
really light, George. There's like 2 cop cars chasing them until they get to the bridge, and then there's about 4.
Then there's the chief who's like, oh my God. And it's just like, it's just a little bit ridiculous. And then at one point Roger's steering the fire truck from the box on the back that controls the water or something. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
It's swinging around. It's clearly Roger on back projection again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what that scene does for the movie itself.
It's a bit of a weak action scene in sort of the main cut of everything.
Especially since they could have actually just walked away from the ladder at the end, so they had to add this whole elaborate thing of being chased down. We haven't really talked about the other henchmen, I mean, obviously there's Jenny Flex and the non-named...
yeah, they're sort of like the girls that are just sweeping up the dead bodies and carrying around petrol cans.
Yeah, and they're totally fine with it. And then there's also Scar. What's he called? I think he's called Scar something. The French guy.
Oh, the head of security.
Head of security. He's actually called. I didn't hear the name. I should know this, but check the credits. His actual character name. You know, he's got the big scar on his face. His name is actually something like Mr. Scar.
Scaramouche. Scar.
No, it's something like Scarman or Scarface. Not Scarface. That would be too close. But yeah, so we've got this and it is an elaborate plan. So you get to the mine and you see that they're going to flood the mines, but they're also filling up the mines with explosives. So the explosives are going to trigger an earthquake.
And none of the miners seem sort of like, you know, a little bit troubled by the idea that why are we bringing in all these explosives?
Yeah, and then there's also that thing where they all have to die. I mean, obviously we get to see, I suppose that's a demonstration of how much of a psychopath.
Unhinged psychopath.
Yeah. Careful, Stacey, he's a psychopath. You get to see that, how far he will go, and you also, you know, Burt Reynolds.
Budget Burt Reynolds.
Poor man Burt Reynolds gets a few lines. It's like, these men, they trust you, they work for you. And he's like, I don't care.
And Walken is, I mean, you know, we take the piss out of his accent, but he's so good in this, and like that sort of chilling, unhinged, you just like, yeah, he'll have a little bit of a giggle before he's mowing down people.
It's terrifying.
That sort of, he's very happy. There is one bit where when they're at the estate, you know, when they get him away from her, bit where he's like, I think they both have a laugh together, and it's sort of like maniacal laugh, and like Grace Jones is like, ha ha ha. But apart from that, he's a very good villain, and I think, I wouldn't say he's underused, but it would have been interesting to see him in against Roger in his prime or against Dalton.
Yeah.
It would have been, you know...
But great to have him in a Bond film. We haven't really talked about it much, but the love triangle that's going on between Mayday, Max Zorin, and Max Zorin's Nazi granddad.
Evil Nazi granddad.
There's a lot of love between the two.
Because he's kind of like the evil Nazi granddad with the monocle. Is kind of like his surrogate father. He's done loads of tests and pumped him full of drugs really early on, so he's looked after him.
Yeah, he's taking really good care of him. I mean, I saw some synergy or some harking back with that wonderful Bond film that no one wants to forget, Die Another Day.
Yeah.
That whole thing about like a super soldier who was killed but actually comes back. So there was a few things borrowed from that, and also the snowboarding scene might have inspired that terrible opening scene. But enough about Die Another Day, which just needs to die.
Yes, today. I think the evil Nazi granddad, if you need anyone in a stressful situation, you just need a doddering old man and a safe full of dynamite.
Yeah, so we get to the bit, obviously...
you've got the bit in the mine where there's sort of the flooding, the gunning down.
Mayday and Bond work together to survive.
To survive together, which is, yeah, I don't know, just seems a little bit... She's like the Terminator hunting him down through the tunnels, and then she's like... Zorin screwed me over. I'm with you more.
But I think it's also because when they start flooding those tunnels, Roger really looks like he's in peril again because he's keeping his head above water. And once again, you kind of fear for him a little bit. You're like, is Roger going to be all right? I mean, now, back then when we watched it, this went over our heads.
Yes.
It's now when you watch it, it's like, I'm thinking about insurance. I'm wondering, did he have people underneath making sure he didn't drown? But yeah, so they managed to get out. They do, obviously, the whole thing with the timer. Mayday sacrifices herself.
The very subtle and very quiet airship.
Yeah, and then we're on the blimp. Which blimp? I don't know. Is it the really small one? Is it the really big one?
It's one you can fit in a very small office.
But George, tell us about, obviously, because Bond manages to grab a rope line, and this caused some actual, in real life, when this was being filmed, this caused a bit of a ruckus, didn't it?
Yeah, so it was actually filmed at Bond films have a history of doing a lot of stuff at Pinewood where it's filmed, so in South London, and replicating very tropical destinations. So we were watching Casino Royale the other night, and there's that bit that's supposed to be Sierra Leone, and that is just the backlot at Pinewood. For A View to a Kill, the mine sequences were filmed at Amberley Chalk Pits Museum in Sussex. And apparently when the airship was flown with a dummy hanging underneath, obviously it was not a real Roger Moore, the Sussex Police Board had loads of people calling in saying there was a man in trouble hanging off a blimp.
A really small blimp.
Very, very small man, very small blimp.
Yeah.
So yes, you've got Sussex doubling for San Fran.
And you've got Bond, I mean, I think it was a bit reckless of Max Zorin. You've got Bond dangling from a rope of your airship. Well, let's take him out using the bridge, you know?
Why don't you just cut the rope?
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Or shoot him.
Why don't you just shoot him in the face?
But it does get to that point because obviously we're at the Golden Gate Bridge and they have this. Well, you can't really say it's Christopher Walken squaring off against Roger Moore because it's not in terms of the stuntmen. I think they look at each other.
Well, again, I think in Sussex they built sort of a replica section of the Golden Gate Bridge because obviously they couldn't really film on the Golden Gate Bridge or there's only so much they were allowed to do.
Yeah.
It's a thrilling scene if you don't pay too much attention to the stuntmen and the back projection.
Because it's just that one scene where you see the view from the airship and you're looking down one of the girders of the bridge and you're like, who are these two guys? There's these two guys having a fight and it's supposed to be Roger Moore and Christopher Walken. And it's like they're both massive guys having a fight. I think it's probably because they've got safety harnesses attached to them.
But it's all right because what they've cleverly done in the ADR, in the overdubbing, you've just got a few Roger Moore, oof, oof. So yeah. That's obviously Roger Moore. It sounds like Roger Moore.
But fair play to them because we didn't lose them as a result because didn't this happen when they were approaching somebody else for the role of Max Zorin about stuntmen?
Yes. I suppose that gives us time to jump into Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda. In early publicity, David Bowie was announced to play the role of Zorin and the script was written with him in mind. He later decided to turn down the role and do Labyrinth instead because...
Thank God.
And baby said...
Dance, magic dance. Dance, magic dance.
Apparently said, I didn't want to spend 5 months watching my stunt double fall off the cliffs.
Which he has a point, but...
So then, after Bowie dropped out, the role was offered to Geordie local legend Sting. But I think Sting was too busy championing
tantric sex.
Tantric sex. It was then Chris Walken, can you just dye your hair a bit Bowie Sting-esque? Yeah, that'll do. Also, it's not really a coulda, woulda, shoulda, but more of a blink and you'll miss him. It's the first on-screen appearance for Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah.
Who is playing a KGB agent for all of about 2 or 3 seconds.
KGB soldier.
When the KGB go face off against Zorin at the race stands. And Dolph Lundgren was cast because he was currently dating Grace Jones. And they needed somebody like an extra on set and he happened to be on set, so it was like, you put on the suit, wear a gun.
Yeah, because who's the girl in Red Sonja?
That's Bridget Nielsen.
See, he really did like mannish muscular women, didn't he? Because he was with her, wasn't he?
Well, she got around. She was with Arnie and Sly as well.
Wow.
Yeah, she was married to Sloane, but she also had an affair with Arnie. I think I read that in his book.
Maybe that's why they...
Total Recall.
Oh, did you mention that?
Yeah. Did I also mention I wrote, my word is my bond.
Yes, he did.
And in the autobiography, Roger reveals that in the sex scene with Grace Jones, who he doesn't have a good thing to say about, she thought it would be funny to bring a black dildo into the bedroom.
Is that why he looks so petrified?
I did not find it amusing.
Do you reckon it was a strap-on? Oh, so like when she straddles him, it's just like...
Well, that's probably why he looks so terrified.
He is in genuine peril.
He is in genuine peril. So yeah, we're pretty much at the end. There's again, sort of one of those obligatory scenes where M and Q are perving on Bond, getting it on with the lady.
But also the MI5 and the KGB are just enjoying brandies. They're working together. The Cold War's over by this stage.
It's almost over.
Yeah, Russia's not a threat anymore.
Yeah, I've got it down as the last line where Roger is with Stacey in the shower, and I think the last line is, ooh.
Surprise face.
Ooh.
But yeah, I mean, what I'd like to say in terms of closing about this is haters are going to hate this, but this walks and talks like a proper Bond film. As we've talked about, it's got all of the sound effects, it's got the sort of music you would expect, it's got a great bad guy who's hamming it up to 11, which for me, it has to be done. Like, as we said, George and I watched, just shows how much Bond fans we are, just because we had a bit of free time, we watched Casino Royale again, and, you know, Le Chiffre is I love that actor, Mads Mikkelsen, he's a great actor, and it's one of his best roles, and he's a great bad guy, but he's also quite high up in terms of hamminess. It's just done very well.
It's the right amount of hamminess. I think you do need to have a little bit of theatricality being a Bond villain.
You're meant to be a megalomaniac who's trying to take over the world, so you have to be nuts.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a lot of so just to finish, I understand why people dislike this film, but I look at it in the same way as Roger would have said. Yes, I was far too old, and he didn't kind of enjoy it. You can see him, and it was, you know, they were coming to an end, you know. So it's not like he went out in a bad film.
Well,
do you think it would have been better for him to finish?
I think it would have been better if he'd finished on For Your Eyes Only.
So that would have been interesting because we would have had Timothy Dalton. Maybe Brosnan. We might have had Brosnan.
Well, yeah, they were both in the frame at some point, but someone who was very close to getting the role for Octopussy they were looking at, because Roger was umming and ahhing about getting out after For Your Eyes Only, and for Octopussy there was James Brolin, who is Josh Brolin's dad, who was a very credible actor, even though he was actually an American, and they were so impressed at his accent. And there's screen tests online I can put it on the blog of him doing a screen test with Maud Adams from Octopussy.
Lovely, and Moonraker.
No.
Which other one?
Golden Gun.
Sorry, I get confused.
He went as far as actually buying a house in London, and then Roger was like, "No, actually, Cubby, why not?
Let's do one more together.
Just one more."
Well, also, you do look well after that work. You do look a lot younger.
But also, Sam Neill was screen tested as well.
Really, that would have been interesting.
Again, yeah, there's a very brief clip online. But I would say, I've been a bit harsh with Rog and his, looking a bit like a scared skeleton.
We do love him.
We do love him, but actually he's at his fittest out of the sort of in For Your Eyes Only and Octopus, he's looking a little bit tubby, but in this one you can actually see he's lost a bit of weight. He's not like out of shape. No. He's just looking really old.
Yeah, which you can't really criticise him for, because I guess this film, in terms of performance, it did as well as many other Bond films. So
yeah, it was. I think it was. Despite some middling reviews, it was a success.
And the reason why we're doing it is, as we've said, we hope you've indulged over Christmas, and you're going to be you're going to have New Year's resolutions. This was exactly the type of film that you'd expect to watch over a bank holiday, and that is just that's what we're planning to do. Obviously, we'll do our monthly episode, but we are going to be interspersing over the next year with some, just bank holiday specials. So you can expect to see the type of films that you would typically see on terrestrial television on a bank holiday.
So yeah, we've got some interesting films scheduled for 2018, and I think we're going to keep a sort of a tight lid on that for the time being. But yeah, we've got some big films.
Real gigs.
You got some real gigs coming up. Real gigs.
I think we're hopping around a bit from genres and decades to give you a bit of variety. As Charlie says, I think with when the opportunity for a bank holiday comes up, we'll try and keep it in good old British bank holiday fashion.
Exactly, and it will allow us to tackle some of the franchises, make them a bit longer, that we might not be able to tackle in a typical episode.
I mean, obviously, I think we'd like to talk about Bond more often, but we don't want to alienate our audience. That not everyone's a fan of Bond films. I understand that, but you're wrong. I think pretty much round up, though we do have time to we talked about the amazing Duran Duran, and I think this is sort of time we should retitle this music section Bryan Adams Top Pop Facts.
All right, are these did anybody come close to Bryan Adams?
Duran Duran is the only James Bond song to reach the number 1 in the US.
Wow.
And again, it only got to number 2 in the UK, so what's all that about?
Well, I don't think Bryan Adams would be, threatened by those sort of...
No, those numbers. I don't think anyone's going to ever challenge Bryan Adams when it comes to movie themes.
Yeah. We've talked about the product placement in this film, haven't we?
Well, we've talked,
Listen to Buy Sony, Smoke Marlboro.
And drinks Stolichnaya vodka, I think.
Yeah.
Some bottle of Stoli.
Not too much.
There's not a huge amount, but yeah, a lot of Sony type stuff.
They couldn't, well, they had to pay for those stuntmen.
But then you've also got Cubby Broccoli's Rolls Royce is featured, so it's actually the producer's car is used as the car that Godfrey Tibbett drives, and that's the car that's linked to Mark O'Connell's book, Catching Bullets. Cubby was quite happy to put his Rolls Royce in the film. Obviously, it's a replica that gets pushed into the lake when Roger survives on having air out the tyres, which...
Once again, I was really worried about him in that scene. Okay, so I think Retro Ramble will return. We will be back, and we'll be back in the new year. We hope you've had a fantastic holiday, whatever you've been up to, enjoyed some time off, eaten too much, and that you're listening to this podcast just to get away from some of your relatives for an hour.
So I think for January, we are going to return with Con Air.
Well, you know, we done Face Off. That went down really well. We love Nicolas Cage. It's, you know, I think we should start 2018 as we mean to go on.
We foolishly, you know, we ran out of films to do it in 2017 because it was actually 20 years old. So yeah, 1997. We realised that, you know, Nicolas Cage should be taken in small doses.
Yeah, there needs to be a break of at least 11 months before we do another Nicolas Cage film.
But yeah, start the new year with a bang.
Yeah, so you've got that to look forward to. We will return with Con Air. So, what are you going to do now, George?
Well, I'm just going to slip into something more comfortable and then get in my iceberg submarine.
I'm just trying to find kitchen appliances that I can use microchips for. But we hope you've enjoyed that. I've been Charlie McGhee.
I've been George McGhee.
And we'll see you next time.
Oh, James.
Meeting you where the view